Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Venus and today I am going over my favorite books, my best books of 2023. I read 95 books and these are the top 15 of those books. I have 5 honorable mentions and then my very top 10 favorite books of 2023. The first honorable mention is What Have We Done by Alex Finlay. This is a thriller and I had so much fun with this book. It is very over the top, so I know a lot of people didn't enjoy it, but I loved it. It had a very cinematic feel to it. It was fast-paced. There's like a female assassin in it. We are following 4 POVs in this book, and 3 of them lived together in a group home when they were younger. 25 years later, their past has come back to haunt them. They shared an experience while they were at this group home, and it's coming back trying to kill each one of them. We're following Jenna, who is now a stay-at-home mother who used to be an assassin. She was my favorite character in this book. We are following a drunk rock star and a producer of a reality show. I mean, I'm telling you, this book, it's a little over the top, but I enjoyed it. If you want to sit down and just read a very fast-paced book that has a lot of action in it and just get lost in the story, then I definitely recommend this one. Next up is Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies by Heather Fawcett. I had such a great time with this book. It's a very cozy fantasy that obviously talks a lot about fairies, and we are following Emily. She is a professor at Cambridge and she is traveling to a small town up north, very, very north. It's very cold there, a lot of snow. This book is very atmospheric. I definitely recommend reading it. This is a perfect time of year to read it. I loved Emily's personality. She is very antisocial. She doesn't do well with talking to people. She just likes to be in her own little world studying fairies. She also brings along her dog Shadow, who is absolutely hilarious. I laughed out loud quite a few times in this book. There was definitely a couple times when the fairies got a little dark, as fairies tend to do sometimes, and it was just a very well-written book. Kept my attention the entire time. I'm very much looking forward to the next book in this series. Another character in this book is Wendell Bambleby, and he is Emily's academic rival, and she has a love-hate relationship with him, I'll say. He is a very fun character as well. He's got his own secrets that Emily finds out during this book, and it was just a great time. I loved it. I can't wait, like I said, to read the second one. Next up, we have How to Sell a Haunted House by Grady Hendrix. This book was so weird and so much fun and reinforced my hate for dolls and puppets. It is something that I never thought I would enjoy, a book about crazy killer puppets, but I did. Grady Hendrix did such a good job that I loved it. In this book, we are following a brother and sister whose parents just passed away, and they are trying to get the house together to sell it. And their mother was a puppeteer at their church, and she had like hundreds of puppets in their house that they have to try to get rid of so they can get this house ready to be sold. But one of the puppets has decided that, nope, we're not doing that. It goes from there. It's definitely a little crazy. It was a fun ride, and Grady Hendrix is definitely a favorite author of mine. He is an auto-buy author for me. I will literally buy anything that he puts out because I've loved all of his books. The next honorable mention is Video Night by Adam Cesare. This book surprised me. I really enjoyed it. It kind of sparked my interest in reading more alien horror. So this is an alien horror that takes place in the 80s in Long Island, New York. We are following 2 teenagers who like to get together every Friday night and watch VHS movies, scary movies. And in this town, in Long Island, New York, one of their former classmates, this person, pretty sure graduated, is older than them, but she gets taken over by an alien. It got pretty gruesome in this book, and it was just a fun ride with these teenagers. It was literally like watching kind of like a generic 80s movie about alien horror. I had a great time with it. Adam Cesare is the author of Clown on a Cornfield, the slasher, teen slasher books that I also liked. I am really loving his writing, so I'm interested to see what else he puts out. This one, like I said, was a huge surprise for me. I didn't think I would love it as much as I did, but it was one of my favorites this year. It's a short book. It's only about 258 pages if it sounds like something you're interested in. And the last honorable mention is The Cipher by Kathy Koja. This is a horror book. It was very bizarre. It's definitely not for everyone, but the writing in this was very beautiful. We are following this very toxic couple in the 90s, and there's a giant hole in the storeroom of Nicholas's apartment, and it's just like this giant hole, and they become obsessed with it, and they start sending things down into it, and when the things come back up, they are not the same. and it just kind of spirals out of control from there, and it stayed with me all year. I just kept coming back to this and thinking about how odd it was and how amazing the writing is. It was just such a bizarre read that just stayed with me all year, so I definitely had to mention this one. Now we are getting into my top 10, and my number 10 book of 2023 is Lone Women by Victor Lavalle. I loved this book. This is my first book by this author. His writing is so smooth and beautiful. This is definitely like a slow burn, weird horror historical fiction book, but the writing just kept me completely entranced in this story. So in this story, we are following Adelaide. The opening scene is her childhood home is being burned down, and she is leaving California to go to Montana. The government is giving away free land to anyone who can tame it, so that is what she's doing. She's heading to Montana kind of to start over, and she's dragging this ginormous steamer trunk behind with her. And you have no idea what's in it until we get kind of further in the book. It's very strange, but the writing in this, like I said, was very beautiful. There's found friendship in this. This Adelaide is a Black woman who's in Montana by herself, literally like surrounded by nothing, and she's trying to make a way for herself. And it's just interesting, the relationships that she develops, and then the backdrop of this horror thing in this trunk. There's times where I felt like, is Adelaide a reliable character? Like, what is going on? And it was a great experience. Another book that I think about often and come back to. Can't wait to reread this. I loved how Victor Lavalle mixed together historical fiction, horror, literary fiction, just so many different genres that were mixed into this book, and it was just a very pleasant surprise, so definitely recommend this one. Book number 9 is Drowning by TJ Newman. This is a thriller book that kept me on the edge of my seat the entire time. In this book, 6 minutes after taking off, an airplane crashes into the Pacific Ocean. 12 passengers are stuck in it, and it is sinking, and a professional diver has to come and try to save the 12 passengers that are stuck in this plane. It's intense. All of the 12 characters have very specific characteristics, almost like stereotypical characters, but you find yourself rooting for some of them and for others not so much. And there's a daughter and son in this. The relationship of these two was very heartwarming, and it was just a great fast-paced thriller. I have her other book, Falling, that I plan to read in 2024. I love this author's writing style. Like I said, my heart was like pounding, like I am afraid of flying, so it made it even that much more, probably for me, very gripping. I also love that the author was a flight attendant, so she has like kind of that inside knowledge of planes and crash like protocols and everything. And it was just, God, this book was so good. I can't wait to reread this one and read more from this author. Coming in at number 8 is None of This Is True by Lisa Jewell. This is a psychological thriller that was so good and unhinged, and I loved every second of it. In this book, we are following Alex. She is a true crime podcaster, and then we are also following Josie, who is an unassuming mom, wife, works at, I think it's a seamstress shop, and they both are turning 45 on the same day. They are birthday twins. They run into each other at a pub, and they kind of get to talking, realize they're birthday twins, go their separate ways, and Josie starts really listening to a lot of Alex's podcasts, and they somehow run into each other again. And Josie offers to be the subject of a podcast series for Alex because she is telling her that she is on the cusp of a transformation for herself. And as they start to get to know each other, and as Josie kind of worms her way into Alex's life, you start realizing that Josie has a very bizarre history, background. She's hiding a lot of secrets, and it just becomes very uncomfortable as you're reading it. And I was like, what is going on? Even at the very end, I was still left shocked. So I very much recommend this book if you are into psychological thrillers. Definitely go into it as blind as you can without a lot of information, and I hope you enjoy it because it was a great book. Book number 7 is All the Sinners Bleed by S.A. Cosby. This is another thriller, and this was a fantastic read. I am definitely becoming a huge fan of S.A. Cosby. This is my second book by him. Razorblade Tears was my first book that I read, and it was also on my top favorites, I think, the year before last. And his writing is just so good. This book definitely has triggers, so please check them. It does have some dark storylines in it. There's racism in it. So I would definitely, like I said, check triggers if you have any. We are following Titus. He is the first Black sheriff in this small town in Virginia. So right there, you know there's going to be some conflict. There's a shooting at a school. A Black student kills a well-loved white teacher. And then as the student is kind of coming out of the building, he is shot by a white police officer. And of course, there's going to be, you know, town conflict from that. But Titus quickly finds out that this well-loved teacher is not what everyone thought he was. He definitely had some very dark secrets. And we follow Titus as he tries to unravel this mystery. Titus is really dealing with a lot of different things, including this horrible crime, a possible serial killer that he's investigating, his relationship with his father, his estranged brother. He's got a girlfriend in it that he's got some kind of unresolved issues with. And it's just so good and well written. And it was just so easy to get lost in. And it's a book that makes you angry, but then you're also rooting for Titus to really discover what's going on. This book also has religious undertones in it that I found very interesting, the way that he kind of weaved that into the story as well. And it was a great book. Another auto by author for me. He's just amazing at what he does, and I'm very excited to read more books from this author. I also loved Titus's character so much that I was hoping that this could be a series with him, but the way that it ended, I doubt that would happen. But again, the way that he wrote his character just made me want to read more about him. So definitely recommend All Sinners Bleed by S.A. Cosby. Coming up at number 6 is The Adventures of Amina al-Sarafi by Shannon Chakroborty. This is the first book in a fantasy series, and I loved it so much. This is a pirate fantasy. Amina is a 40-something-year-old mom who used to be a very famous pirate, and she's retired to kind of take care of her family and her daughter. And one of her shipmates, his mother, I think it was, comes to proposition her to try to find her son, and she offers a lot of money for this. So Amina gets back on the ocean and she kind of gathers her crew together, her old crew together. I loved the side characters in this. There is demons and mystical creatures. It's a very lush description of the world as well. It almost felt very vibrant and colorful, and it was fun. It was a fun read. I love the twist at the end, and I'm really looking forward to the second book in this series. Coming in at number 5 is The Justice of Kings by Richard Swan. This is also a fantasy book, and I'm pretty sure that this is going to be one of my favorite trilogies of all time, hoping the third book is just as good. But in this book, we are following Sir Conrad von Valt through the eyes of Helena, his protege. And I think from what I remember, Helena is telling this story as she is an older woman. Because it's written in that way, it's very unique, and I really enjoyed there's often times where she even addresses the audience as she's kind of retelling the story, which I thought was really cool. But in this empire, von Valt is very dedicated to his position as a justice. He takes it very seriously, and he's very dedicated to the empire. And as they travel to these small towns, he hands out justice and does his thing. And Helena's following along, and there's more kind of side characters that become a part of their little crew. It was such a different kind of fantasy story. It almost gave me like Sherlock Holmes Victorian vibes on certain parts of it. There was in the first book a murder mystery that actually goes to like trial. Then you also have the church who's trying to take over power of the empire. So these two like sides that are fighting, and it was so good. It was so good. And it was one of those books that I read, I finished it, I enjoyed it. But then looking back on it, thinking about it, even just talking about it again, I didn't realize how much I loved it until after like time had passed from reading it. The third book in the trilogy comes out, I think in January, February, I can't remember, but I have an arc of it and I can't wait to read it. I'm almost like saving it because I'm afraid that it's not going to end well. But I am very interested to see where this book goes, because the second book, the ending of it was crazy. So Highly recommend this one if you are interested in fantasy. If you have been watching my channel for a while, then you are probably not surprised that Motherthing by Ainsley Hogarth has made my top 10 of the year. This is book, what are we on now? Book 3? Book number 4. This is a horror book, dark, twisted humor, and I loved every single second of it. This is another book that's definitely not for everyone, but I had a fun time with it. We are following Abby, who is married to Ralph, and they are staying with his mother, Laura, and she is very, very mean. Abby was hoping to develop a relationship with Laura because Abby had a very traumatic childhood, didn't have a good relationship with her mother, but unfortunately that did not happen. Laura is a very, very mean character, and then shortly after they move in, Laura ends up killing herself. And she comes back to basically haunt them as a ghost, and Ralph starts losing his mind and just spiraling out of control, very, very depressed, and Abby is determined to save him. Abby also has become very close with a woman that she cares for in a long-term nursing home facility, and this woman's daughter is like another evil, mean character that Abby has to deal with. So Abby is determined to come up with a plan to get rid of the ghost Laura haunting her husband, and it went into a direction that I was not expecting. The ending shocked me, and I was like, what? My favorite part of this book, though, I think why I always think about it so much, is because Abby's inner monologue was so entertaining, and it was so dark and twisted, but I feel like it's very realistic. I would love to say that we all walk around, thinking of wonderful, nice things to say to other people when you're just having regular conversations with someone that you may not like so much. But if we could just turn on that inner monologue for everyone else to hear, it probably wouldn't be so nice all the time. So I loved that was explored in this by the author. I thought it was funny, so funny and relatable. So definitely a favorite of mine for 2023. Coming in at number 3 is Mary by Nat Cassidy. This is a horror book and another one that has some really good inner monologue. We are following Mary. She is a middle-aged woman. She is going through it. She's having hot flashes. She's seeing things. She's got voices in her head. She's got a crazy aunt named Nadine that is driving her crazy. This is also pretty gruesome at times, but she is working in New York. She's very quiet, doesn't really like to talk to people, likes to be on her own, and then she's fired. And right when she's fired, her aunt calls her and wants her to come back home. And when she goes back home, all kinds of crazy slashery things happen. And this book is definitely another unhinged book, but I had a fun time with it. I love that Nat Cassidy explores how women are treated when they're going through, perimenopause and menopause. He wrote a really good afterword in this, kind of describing why he felt like he could write about something like this, and I was very impressed with that. But overall, the story itself was just a fun time. Another book that I think about often, and I am very much going to reread at some point. Yeah, you've got serial killer elements in it. You don't know if Mary is losing her mind or not. Like I said, her aunt Nadine is a very interesting character, and I laughed out loud quite a few times, and then I cringed quite a few times as well, and it was a fun ride. So highly recommend this one. Completely switching up tones here is my book number 2, and that is The Wishing Game by Meg Schaefer. I loved this book. So heartwarming. I've talked about it quite a few times on my channel. This is like a contemporary fiction book where we're following Lucy. She's a teacher's aide, and she's not making a lot of money. She had a very rough childhood. She becomes very attached to a student, I think his name is Christopher, in her classroom. He is in the foster care system. His parents died tragically, and she would really love to be able to adopt him one day. And that dream doesn't seem like it's going to come true because she just doesn't make enough money to qualify to adopt him. And Lucy, when she was younger, to try to escape, her childhood, she got into a series called the Clockwork series. It's a children's series that was written by a very famous author named James Masterson. And he's kind of become a recluse. He's stopped writing books. he disappeared. He's decided he wants to hold a contest on Clock Island where he lives and open it up to a very small group of people that come and try to compete to get a copy of the book that he's written. And if that happens, then Lucy feels like she could adopt Christopher. She is one of the lucky ones that gets to go to Clock Island, which is really my favorite part of this book, being on Clock Island. It was so magical. And I almost wish that I could go there. That's how well written it was. So these contestants, they have to compete through all of these games that he's created on this island. And it's just a fun time. It's emotional, it's happy, it's funny, it's sad. And it just had all of the things. And I think I just read it at a perfect time where I just needed a book like this. And it's absolutely a book that I'll come back to and read again. It's such a good book. I love it so much. I've talked about it so many times. I feel like a broken record, but I highly, highly recommend this book if you're looking for something heartwarming that will make you smile and cry and laugh and just kind of almost, especially with the Clock Island parts of it, reminisce about your childhood if you were a big reader when you were a child, or if you had a rough childhood and reading was escape, because that definitely was for me. So I highly recommend this one. My number one book of 2023, I never in a million years would have thought that this would have been a favorite book of mine, because I honestly took forever to even read it because I was so scared of it. And I'm so glad that I finally overcame my fear and read The Exorcist by William Peter Blatty. I cannot even begin to explain the absolute fear that I've had most of my entire life of this book and the movie, and even just the word exorcist. I couldn't even say for years because I feel like it would just trigger nightmares immediately. This book was so much more than what I thought it would be. So obviously, The Exorcist, we all know about it. It is following a mom, Chris, and her daughter, Reagan, who is possessed by a demon. And I think my favorite part of this book, the way that it was written, is the passion that Chris had to try to save her daughter. Because initially she didn't know what was wrong with her. I mean, one day she's her perfect little daughter, child, you know, doing regular things. And like the next day she becomes this demon child. And she's very determined to find out what is wrong with her. And the priest in this is struggling with his own faith. And then you have a detective who is determined to figure out about a murder that happens that he feels is related to Chris's home. Chris is a famous actress. And just so many elements of this book worked for me. The audiobook was absolutely amazing, and it is narrated by the author. And I thought that it just gave so much more depth to the characters. And I just, yeah, when I sat down and wrote out my list, I was like, it's The Exorcist. It still sits with me. I'm still in love with the story, even though it's freaking scary. And I could only read it with the lights on. And I still have not gotten the courage to watch the movie again because it traumatized me as a child. But this is definitely one of my favorite horror books of all time. And I would say I highly recommend it, but definitely read it at your own risk, because if you're anything like I was, just this, and I usually can read books about demons, but it was just something about this one that just made it so much more scarier and freakier. It just felt very realistic almost. I guess that might be why I had such a fear of it. But yes, The Exorcist is my number one book of 2023. So I didn't have a lot of 5-star reads. I honestly only had like 5, and 3 of those were, I think 2 or 3 of those were rereads. But I did have a lot of 4-star reads that really stuck with me this year. And I'm hoping that I get more 5-star reads in 2024. I'm very strict about my 5-star reads. It has to be like a perfect, I would not change one single thing about it. That's how I rate books, 5 stars. So didn't have a lot of them this year, but very close to it. I hope you guys have a fantastic 2024 reading year. I hope you have plenty of 5-star reads. Please, I'd love to hear below what was your favorite book of 2023, and have you read any of these? Were any of these on your list of best books or worst books? I'd like to hear that too. As always, thank you so much for stopping by, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. See ya!